A battle-scarred military canine Malinois limped out of the wilderness, eyes locked on the female ranger, with an intelligence that transcended words. When she discovered what the dog was desperately trying to show her, she collapsed to her knees, in tears. This isn't just a story about an abandoned service dog. It's about courage that persists when everything is lost, about unbreakable bonds formed in the darkest places, and about finding redemption in the most unexpected wilderness encounters. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The September rain fell in sheets across Blackridge National Forest, turning the patrol roads into ribbons of mud and fallen pine needles. Ranger Sophia Reyes guided her Forest Service truck carefully around a bend, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. At 34, Sophia wore her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, her Forest Service uniform bearing the weathered look of someone who preferred the company of trees to people. The radio crackled with updates about the storm, but Sophia barely registered the words. Her mind was elsewhere, lost in the echoes of a phone call she'd received that morning. 6 months probation, her supervisor had said, voice clinically detached over the phone. The incident with the poachers was deemed excessive force, Reyes. You're lucky to still have a job. Sophia's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Excessive force, because she'd drawn her service weapon on 3 men who were slaughtering protected wolves. Men who had been armed themselves. Men who had threatened her when she identified herself. The memory burned inside her chest, another institution failing to stand behind her, just like the police academy 5 years ago. The windshield wipers thumped a hypnotic rhythm as she made her final patrol loop before returning to her cabin. The isolation of the ranger position in Blackridge had appealed to her precisely because it kept her away from bureaucracy and office politics. Now even this sanctuary was compromised. Lightning flashed, momentarily turning the forest into a stark black and white photograph. In that flash, Sophia caught sight of something on the road ahead, a shape that didn't belong among the trees and mud. She slowed the truck, squinting through the rain-blurred windshield. The headlights cut through the gloom to illuminate an animal standing at the edge of the road. A dog. Not the typical stray or abandoned pet occasionally dumped in the national forest by irresponsible owners. This was a Belgian Malinois, a breed Sophia recognized immediately from her police training days. The dog stood with military stillness despite the driving rain, its amber eyes reflecting the headlights with unsettling intelligence. Sophia pulled the truck to a stop 20 feet from the animal. The dog didn't run or bark. It simply watched, its posture communicating an almost human intentionality. Its light brown coat was matted with mud and what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The animal favored its right front leg, holding it slightly above the ground. "What are you doing?" "Out here, boy," Sophia murmured, mostly to herself. She reached for her radio but hesitated. Protocol required reporting stray animals to the county animal control, but something about this dog made her pause. Its bearing was too disciplined, its gaze too focused. She grabbed her rain jacket and opened the truck door. The storm hit her. Instantly, cold droplets stinging her face as she stepped onto the muddy road. The dog tensed but didn't retreat. "Easy," Sophia called over the rainfall, keeping her voice steady and low. "I'm not going to hurt you." She approached slowly, hands visible, posture non-threatening. The same techniques she'd used approaching unpredictable suspects during her brief police career. The Malinois watched her advance, its eyes never leaving her face. As she drew closer, Sophia could see the dog was in worse shape than she'd initially thought. Its coat was not only dirty, but laced with scratches. A deeper gash ran along its flank, partially healed but still angry-looking. Despite these injuries, the animal held, itself with dignity, spine straight, ears alert. At 10 feet away, Sophia stopped, giving the dog space. "Hey there," she said softly. "You're a long way from anywhere, aren't you?" The Malinois tilted its head slightly, ears twitching forward at the sound of her voice. Then, with deliberate slowness, it turned away from her and took 3 limping steps toward the forest before looking back over its shoulder. The message was unmistakable. "Follow me." Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. "You want me to go with you?" The dog took several more steps, then paused again, looking back with an almost human impatience. Everything in Sophia's training told her not to follow an unknown animal into the forest during a storm. It was exactly the kind of decision that had landed her on probation, acting on instinct rather than procedure. But as the Malinois stood, waiting in the rain, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a clear sense of purpose cutting through the fog of disillusionment. "All right," she conceded, returning to her truck quickly to grab her field pack, flashlight and first aid kit. "But this better not be a wild goose chase." The dog watched her gather supplies, its intensity never wavering. When Sophia closed the truck door and secured her pack, the Malinois immediately began moving into the forest, maintaining a pace that accommodated its injured leg while ensuring Sophia could follow through the difficult terrain. They left the road behind, entering the dense pine forest, where the canopy provided some shelter from the rain. Sophia clicked on her flashlight, sweeping the beam across the ground to avoid roots and holes. The Malinois moved with confidence through the wilderness, occasionally glancing back to ensure she was following. "You know exactly where you're going, don't you?" Sophia murmured. The dog led her along what appeared to be a game trail, winding between ancient trees and across a small stream swollen with rainwater. Sophia's boots splashed through shallow puddles, her uniform becoming soaked despite her rain gear. After 15 minutes of hiking, the trees began to thin, revealing a small clearing ahead. The Malinois stopped at the edge of the clearing, turning to look at Sophia before proceeding. Its behavior was so deliberate, so calculated, that Sophia found herself wondering again what she had gotten herself into. The storm had lessened to a steady drizzle, the thunder now distant growls rather than overhead crashes. "What is it you want me to see?" Sophia asked, moving alongside the dog. The answer came as they entered the clearing. A small, crude shelter had been constructed against the base of a massive fallen oak. Built from branches, bark and forest debris, it revealed the desperate ingenuity of someone with survival training but minimal supplies. Outside the shelter, a fire pit contained the cold remains of a small fire, now just wet ash and charred wood. Sophia approached cautiously, the Malinois limping beside her with renewed urgency. The shelter opening was small, requiring her to stoop to see inside. She directed her flashlight beam into the dark space. What she saw caused her breath to catch in her throat. A man lay inside, unmoving, partially covered with a tattered military-issue rain poncho. His face was gaunt, beard overgrown, skin pale against the dark earth. Beside him lay another Malinois, smaller than the first, its body curled protectively. Against the man's side, this second dog raised its head weakly, eyes reflecting Sophia's flashlight with a dull gleam. "Oh my God!" Sophia breathed, dropping to her knees and crawling into the shelter. The man didn't respond to her voice or the light. His breathing was shallow, skin hot with fever when Sophia pressed her hand to his forehead. Dog tags hung around his neck, partially obscured by his ragged jacket. She gently lifted them, reading the embossed metal. Winters, Alexander J., Chief Sergeant, U.S. Army K-9 Unit. Sophia looked from the tags to the dog that had led her here, understanding dawning like a physical pain in her chest. This wasn't just any Malinois. This was a military working dog, and the man, Sergeant Winters, was its handler. "You came for help," she whispered to the dog, who stood watch at the shelter entrance, eyes never leaving its handler. You knew he was dying. The first dog, the one who had led her here, stepped closer, pressing its muzzle against the sergeant's limp hand. The gesture contained such devotion that Sophia felt her throat tighten. The second dog, clearly younger, and severely injured itself, whimpered softly, its loyalty evident even in its weakened state. Sophia's training took over as she quickly assessed the situation. The sergeant was severely dehydrated, running a high fever, and had a poorly bandaged wound on his leg that showed signs of infection. He needed immediate medical attention. She reached for her radio, heart pounding. "This is Ranger Reyes. I have a medical emergency in Sector 7, approximately 2 miles east of Forest Road 22. I've located an injured man. Appears to be military, in critical condition. Need immediate medical evacuation, over." The radio crackled. "Copy, Ranger Reyes. Can you provide coordinates for medevac?" Sophia relayed the GPS coordinates from her handheld device, adding, "Be advised there are 2 military dogs on site. Protective but not aggressive. Handler appears to be a Sergeant Alexander Winters, Army K9 unit. Copy that. Medevac dispatched. ETA 20 minutes. Can you stabilize until arrival?" "Affirmative," Sophia replied, already opening her field medical kit. As she worked to clean the sergeant's wound and start an IV from her emergency supplies, thanking her police medical training, the first Malinois watched her every move with intelligent scrutiny. There was something in its eyes that transcended animal awareness, a consciousness that seemed to evaluate her actions. "What's your name, huh?" Sophia asked softly, glancing at the dog's neck where a tactical collar bore a partially obscured tag. She gently turned the metal plate to read the engraving, "Valor, U.S. Army K9. "Valor," she repeated, the name settling in her chest with weight. "You've certainly earned it." The younger dog's collar identified it as Scout, as Sophia tended. To the unconscious sergeant, the pieces began coming together in her mind. A military K9 handler and 2 dogs, miles from any road or trail, with improvised survival shelter rather than proper camping equipment. The dog's protective behavior rather than fear or aggression. The man's condition suggesting he'd been caring for the dogs rather than himself. This wasn't a camping trip gone wrong. This was something else entirely. The medevac helicopter's distant thumping grew louder, but Sophia barely registered it. Her focus had narrowed to the unconscious man and the extraordinary dog who had sought her out. Valor stood sentinel, dividing his attention between his handler and the forest around them, still on duty despite everything. When Sophia had stabilized, the sergeant as best she could, she found herself overwhelmed by a wave of emotion so powerful it caught her off guard. Here was loyalty beyond explanation. A service dog who had ventured into the wilderness alone, injured himself to find help for his handler. A dog who had recognized a forest ranger's uniform and understood it meant assistance. A dog who had never abandoned his post. As the helicopter's searchlight cut through the forest canopy, illuminating the clearing in harsh white light, Sophia felt tears streaming down her face, mingling with the rain still dripping from her hair. "You never stopped serving," she whispered, to Valor, who stood unflinching as the helicopter roared overhead, even when the mission seemed impossible. The second dog, Scout, pressed closer to the sergeant, protective even in its weakened state. In that moment, as rescue personnel began rappelling from the helicopter, Sophia realized she was witnessing something that would change her forever. A demonstration of loyalty and courage that made her own recent struggles seem small by comparison. Whatever had brought Sergeant Winters and his dogs to this forest, whatever they were running from or toward, they had faced it together, unflinching. And in that realization, something long dormant awakened inside her. A sense of purpose that, had been buried beneath years of disappointment and institutional betrayal. If a dog could show this kind of unwavering commitment, what excuse did she have for surrendering her own principles? As the medical team rushed into the clearing, Sophia stood, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. This story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The medical evacuation team worked with practiced efficiency, securing Sergeant Winters to a backboard while a paramedic assessed his vital signs. Sophia stood to the side of the clearing, rain dripping from her uniform as she watched them prepare the unconscious man for transport. BP is 90-60, temperature 103. 2, the lead paramedic called out, inserting an IV line. Definite signs of infection. In the leg wound. We need to move quickly. Valor remained focused on his handler, watching every movement with unwavering attention. When one of the paramedics reached toward the sergeant's tactical vest, the dog growled low in his throat, not threatening, but clearly communicating a boundary. The dogs, Sophia said, stepping forward. They need to come too, especially the younger one. It's injured badly. The paramedic glanced up with a frown. Ma'am, we're not equipped for animal transport. Our priority is the human patient. Sophia moved closer to Valor, placing a steady hand on his back. The dog allowed the touch, but didn't shift his gaze from his handler. These aren't just any dogs. They're military working dogs, and they're part of his unit. That one, she said, pointing to Scout, needs veterinary care immediately. We have protocols. I understand protocols, Sophia interrupted, her voice taking on the firm edge she'd developed during her police years. But these dogs kept this man alive in the wilderness. The older one traveled miles with an injured leg to find help. They're coming with us, or I guarantee they'll follow the helicopter, on foot if they have to. The flight medic exchanged glances with his colleague, then sighed. Fine, but you're responsible for them. If they become aggressive or interfere with patient care, they won't, Sophia said with certainty she couldn't entirely explain. Something in Valor's disciplined bearing told her this was a dog trained to perform under the most extreme circumstances. The paramedics carefully lifted Sergeant Winters onto the stretcher. As they raised him, his eyes fluttered open momentarily, unfocused and glassy with fever. His cracked lips moved, forming a word Sophia couldn't hear over the helicopter's rotors. She moved closer, leaning down. Valor, the sergeant whispered, his voice barely audible. Scout. They're right here, Sophia assured him, gesturing to the dogs. They're coming with you. They're safe. Relief flickered across the man's face before his eyes closed again. The medics continued their work, attaching monitoring equipment as they prepared to move him to the helicopter. Sophia knelt beside Scout, gently examining the younger dog. Unlike Valor's disciplined stoicism, Scout whimpered softly as she assessed a deep laceration along his flank. The wound had been bandaged at some point, but the dressing was dirty and partially dislodged. Let's get you taken care of too, buddy, she murmured, carefully lifting the smaller Malinois. The dog tensed but didn't resist, sensing her intention to help. As the rescue team prepared to transport Sergeant Winters to the helicopter, Valor positioned himself alongside the stretcher, limping but determined. The medics exchanged looks of surprise at the dog's behavior. He'll follow the stretcher, Sophia explained, still carrying Scout. He won't interfere. Sure enough, Valor moved in perfect formation with the team, maintaining his position as they navigated the difficult terrain back to the helicopter landing zone. His training was evident in every deliberate movement, every calculated adjustment to stay with his handler without impeding the rescue personnel. At the helicopter, the flight medic helped Sophia secure Scout in the cabin, while Valor jumped in without assistance, positioning himself near Sergeant Winter's feet, clear of the medical equipment but close enough to maintain visual contact. "I've never seen anything like this," the medic admitted as they prepared for takeoff. "These dogs are something else." Sophia nodded, securing herself in a seat while keeping a hand on Scout's trembling body. "Which hospital are we headed to?" "Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Riverview," the medic replied over the increasing roar of the rotors, "best equipped to handle military personnel in the region." The helicopter lifted off, rising above the forest canopy. Sophia looked down, at the small clearing growing smaller below them, the crude shelter barely visible among the trees. What had driven a military canine handler and his dogs into such isolation? How long had they been out there, and what were they running from, or to? The flight to Riverview took 30 minutes, during which Sophia divided her attention between monitoring the dogs and observing the paramedics working on Sergeant Winters. His condition had stabilized somewhat, but the infection in his leg was serious. Valor maintained his vigilant watch throughout the flight, while Scout drifted in and out of consciousness in Sophia's arms. When they landed on the hospital helipad, a medical team was waiting. Sergeant Winters was quickly transferred to a gurney and wheeled toward the emergency department. Sophia followed with the dogs, Valor limping determinedly alongside his handlers. Gurney, while she carried Scout. A hospital administrator intercepted them at the entrance, his expression firm. "I'm sorry, but animals aren't permitted in the hospital unless they're registered service animals." Sophia straightened to her full height, her ranger uniform mud-stained but authoritative. "These are military working dogs, part of Sergeant Winter's K9 unit. The sergeant was just evacuated from Blackridge Forest in critical condition. These dogs protected him and sought help. They're the reason he's alive." The administrator hesitated, looking from Sophia to the dogs. Valor stood at attention, despite his injuries, his bearing unmistakably military. Even in his weakened state, there was something commanding about his presence. "The dogs need veterinary care," Sophia continued, "but they also need to stay near. Their handler, it's critical for all of them." Before the administrator could respond, a voice called from down the corridor, "Let them through." A woman in an army uniform approached, her insignia identifying her as a major. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her expression a mixture of concern and authority. "Major Diana Chen, Army Veterinary Corps," she introduced herself, extending a hand to Sophia. "We received the alert about Sergeant Winters and his dogs. I've been assigned to this case." Relief washed over Sophia. "Ranger Sophia Reyes, Blackridge National Forest Service. This is Valor," she nodded toward the older Malinois, "and Scout. Valor found me in the forest and led me to Sergeant Winters. Both dogs need medical attention, especially Scout." Major Chen knelt to examine Scout, her hands moving with gentle expertise over the younger dog's injuries. "Puncture wound in the left flank, signs of infection, dehydration," she assessed quickly, "and Valor here has a sprained front leg, lacerations, and is also dehydrated." She stood, turning to the administrator. "These dogs are military assets, and critical to understanding what happened to Sergeant Winters. I'm authorizing their presence." The administrator nodded reluctantly. "They'll need to be contained in a designated area." "I'll handle the arrangements," Major Chen interrupted firmly. "For now, let's get all 3 patients stabilized." As Sergeant Winters was wheeled into a treatment room, Major Chen led Sophia and the dogs to an adjacent veterinary examination room. The hospital, Sophia learned, had a specialized military medicine wing that included facilities for working dogs. "You can put Scout on the examination table," Major Chen instructed, washing her hands before pulling on surgical gloves. "Tell me everything you know about how you found them." While the Major began treating Scout's wounds, Sophia recounted the entire encounter, Valor appearing on the forest road, leading her to the shelter, discovering Sergeant Winters and Scout. As she spoke, Valor sat near the door, his eyes fixed. On the wall, separating him from his handler, his posture alert, despite his exhaustion. "It's extraordinary," Sophia concluded. "Valor must have traveled miles to find help, injured as he is. He knew exactly what to do, identified me as someone who could help, led me back without hesitation." Major Chen nodded as she cleaned Scout's wound. Belgian Malinois are exceptional animals, and military working dogs receive training that pushes their capabilities even further. But what Valor did goes beyond training. That's intelligence and devotion that can't be taught. As she worked, a doctor in surgical scrubs entered the room. "Major Chen, Sergeant Winters is stabilized. The infection is serious, but responding to antibiotics. He's still unconscious, but his vitals are improving." "Thank you, Dr. Patel. Any indication of what happened to him?" "The leg wound appears to be from a knife, not particularly deep, but became infected. He's showing signs of prolonged exposure and malnutrition. Whatever happened, he's been in those woods for at least a week, possibly longer." Major Chen finished bandaging Scout and moved to examine Valor, who submitted to her inspection with military discipline. "This is highly unusual," she said, carefully examining his injured leg. "Sergeant Winters is one of our best handlers. His unit was on leave after returning from deployment 3 months ago. There were no active assignments that would place him in a national forest, living rough." "Could he have been on a training exercise?" Sophia asked. "Not with an injured dog and no communication equipment," Major Chen replied, frowning as she cleaned a deep cut on Valor's shoulder. "And certainly not in a makeshift shelter. Something else was going on here." As they spoke, a tall man in a dark suit appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Major Chen, I need to speak with you regarding Sergeant Winters." The Major straightened, her manner becoming more formal. "Agent Blackwood, I wasn't expecting you." "The situation has escalated," the man replied, his eyes shifting to Sophia. "Who is this?" "Ranger Sophia Reyes. She found Sergeant Winters and his dogs in Blackridge National Forest." The agent's gaze sharpened. "Ms. Reyes, I'm Special Agent Blackwood, Department of Defense. I need you to brief me on exactly how you found Sergeant Winters and what condition he and his equipment were in." Sophia felt Valor tense beside her, a barely perceptible change in the dog's posture. Something about this agent had triggered a response. She placed a reassuring hand on the Malinois' back, feeling the tight muscles beneath his fur. "I've just finished explaining everything to Major Chen," Sophia said carefully. "Valor found me during my patrol and led me to where Sergeant Winters and Scout were sheltering. The sergeant was unconscious with an infected leg wound. There was minimal equipment, just a makeshift shelter and the remains of a small fire." "Any weapons? Communications devices? Documents?" Agent Blackwood pressed. "No, just basic survival. A gear, a canteen, a small first aid kit, a military poncho. Nothing electronic that I saw." The agent nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "Major Chen, a word in private?" As they stepped outside the examination room, Sophia knelt beside Valor, studying the intelligent animal more closely. His tactical collar held not only his name tag, but also a small, weatherproof pouch she hadn't noticed before. Gently she opened it, finding a tightly folded piece of waterproof paper inside. Valor watched her unfold it, making no move to stop her. The paper contained a series of numbers and letters, handwritten in a precise military style, not coordinates, some kind of code. Sophia quickly refolded the paper and returned it to the pouch, sensing that whatever was written there was significant. As Major Chen and Agent Blackwood re-entered the room, she stood, keeping her discovery to herself for the moment. "Ranger Reyes," Agent Blackwood said, his tone formally polite now. "Thank you for your assistance in this matter. The army will take things from here. You're free to return to your duties." Sophia looked at Valor and Scout, then at Major Chen. "With respect, sir, I'd like to ensure these dogs receive proper care. They've been through a traumatic experience." "The dogs will be well cared for," Agent Blackwood said dismissively. "This is now a military matter," Major Chen intervened, her tone professional but firm. "Actually, Agent Blackwood, Ranger Reyes's continued presence would be valuable. She's established a rapport with the dogs, particularly Valor, military E. Working dogs form strong bonds and can become unstable in unfamiliar environments without trusted contacts." The agent's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Fine. She can stay with the dogs, but Sergeant Winters is off limits for now." After he left, Major Chen turned to Sophia, her expression troubled. "Something's not right here. Sergeant Winters and his dogs were considered missing 3 weeks ago, but the search was called off after just 5 days. There's been an unusual level of classification around his disappearance." Sophia thought of the coded paper in Valor's collar. "These dogs are more than just military assets to him. They're partners. Whatever happened, whatever he was doing in that forest, he was protecting them as much as they were protecting him." Major Chen nodded, finishing Valor's treatment. "That's why I want you to stay involved, Ranger Reyes. Valor trusted you enough to seek you out. That trust might be crucial in figuring out what really happened." As Sophia helped secure fresh bandages on Valor's leg, she felt the weight of being drawn into something larger and more complex than a simple rescue. This wasn't just about saving a man and his dogs from the wilderness. It was about uncovering the truth that had driven them there in the first place, a truth someone apparently wanted to keep hidden. Looking into Valor's intelligent eyes, Sophia made a silent promise. She would protect these extraordinary dogs and help uncover what had happened to their handler, no matter where that path might lead. The Veterans Affairs Medical Center quieted as evening approached. The fluorescent lights of the veterinary examination room cast a sterile glow over Sophia as she sat on the floor beside Valor's recovery bed. The dog's amber eyes remained alert, despite the sedatives Major Chen had administered to help manage his pain. Scout slept fitfully in an adjacent kennel, his smaller body finally surrendering to exhaustion after treatment. Sophia's ranger uniform had dried stiff with mud, and exhaustion pulled at her limbs after the day's events. Still, she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something about Agent Blackwood's interest in the case troubled her deeply. His questions had focused on equipment and documents rather than Sergeant Winters' well-being. The coded note hidden in Valor's collar weighed on her mind, a secret she'd kept instinctively, though she couldn't articulate why. Major Chen entered the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd changed from her uniform into hospital scrubs, her dark hair now loose around her shoulders. "You look like you could use this," she said, offering a cup to Sophia. "It's terrible, but it's caffeinated." Sophia accepted gratefully. "Any news on Sergeant Winters?" "He's stabilized. The infection's responding to antibiotics, but he hasn't regained consciousness." Major Chen leaned against the examination table, studying Valor. "They have him under guard. Blackwood's people, not regular military police." Sophia sipped her coffee, considering this information. "That seems extreme for a soldier who got lost in the woods." "Exactly." Major Chen lowered her voice. "Alex Winters isn't just any K9 handler. He was part of a specialized unit that worked closely with intelligence operations. His dogs are trained beyond standard military protocols." Sophia glanced at Valor, who watched their conversation with unnerving comprehension. "What kind of training?" "Enhanced scent detection, including electronic components and data storage, advanced reconnaissance, tactical operations in sensitive environments." Major Chen's expression grew serious. There are rumors about experimental training programs for military working dogs, capabilities beyond what's publicly acknowledged. Sophia thought about how Vala had sought her out, how deliberately he had communicated his need for her to follow. He understood exactly what he was doing when he found me. This wasn't just a dog looking for help. He was executing a mission. Major Chen nodded. That's what concerns me about Blackwood's interest. Whatever Alex was doing in those woods, it wasn't a training exercise gone wrong, and the DoD wants to contain it. Sophia hesitated, then made a decision. There's something you should know. She moved to Vala's side, gently opening the small pouch on his collar and extracting the folded paper. I found this earlier. I don't know why, but something told me not to mention it to Agent Blackwood. Major Chen unfolded the paper, studying the sequence of letters and numbers. It's encrypted, she said after a moment. Military grade, but not standard protocol. Alex created his own system. She looked up sharply. This is significant, Ranger Reyes. If Alex went to the trouble of encrypting information and hiding it with Vala instead of carrying it himself, he was anticipating capture, Sophia finished. Or worse. I need to make a call, Major Chen said, carefully refolding the paper. Someone I trust who might be able to decode this. In the meantime, I'd recommend you don't share this with anyone else, especially not Blackwood. After the Major left, Sophia returned to Vala's side, gently running her hand over his head. What were you and your handler involved in? She murmured. Vala's eyes held hers, intelligent and assessing. Then, deliberately, he shifted his gaze toward the door and back to Sophia. A moment later, footsteps approached in the hallway. Sophia quickly moved away from the dog, pretending to check Scout's water bowl as Agent Blackwood entered the room. Ranger Reyes, he greeted, his tone professionally cool. Still here, I see. The dogs are still adjusting, Sophia replied, matching his tone. Major Chen felt it was important to maintain continuity of care. Blackwood approached Vala's bed, studying the dog with clinical interest rather than compassion. Vala remained still, eyes following the agent's movements. Remarkable animals, Blackwood commented. Military working dogs represent millions in training and operational value. The loss of Sergeant Winter's unit was considered significant from an asset perspective. Sophia noted his use of past tense. Loss. Sergeant Winters is receiving treatment down the hall, and his dogs are right. Here. Of course, Blackwood amended smoothly. Poor choice of words. I meant the temporary misplacement of the unit during their unexplained absence. He turned to face Sophia directly. Tell me again how exactly the dog found you, the precise circumstances. Sophia recounted the encounter on the forest road, keeping her description factual while observing Blackwood's reactions. His interest seemed focused on Vala's behavior rather than the condition of Sergeant Winters or the shelter. And you're certain Sergeant Winters was alone? No indication anyone else had been with him recently? No signs of anyone else, Sophia confirmed. Just the sergeant and his dogs in a survival situation. Blackwood nodded, apparently satisfied. I appreciate your cooperation, Ranger Reyes. The department will arrange transportation for you back to Blackridge tomorrow morning. The military will take full responsibility for Sergeant Winters and his dogs from here. Sophia maintained a neutral expression despite the dismissal. I'd like to check in on them periodically during their recovery, if possible. The dogs have bonded with me through the rescue. That won't be necessary, Blackwood replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. These dogs are highly trained military assets, not pets requiring emotional support. They'll be returned to proper handling protocols. Immediately. Before Sophia could protest, Major Chen returned, nodding professionally to Blackwood. Agent, I've received authorization from Veterinary Command to maintain specialized care for these dogs here rather than transferring them to a military facility. Given their condition and the unique circumstances of their recovery, standard protocols are being modified. Blackwood's expression tightened. I wasn't informed of this decision. The authorization came through just now, Major Chen replied, handing him a document. As the senior military veterinary officer present, I've been granted discretionary authority regarding their care. Blackwood scanned the document, his displeasure evident. This is irregular, Major. So is finding a decorated canine handler living rough in a national forest with his dogs, Agent Blackwood. Major Chen's tone remained professional but firm. The health of these animals takes precedence over administrative preferences. After Blackwood departed, his stride revealing his frustration, Major Chen turned to Sophia. We don't have much time. My contact needs to see that coded message. In person, it's too sensitive to transmit electronically. Your contact, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, Intelligence Division. He served with Alex in Afghanistan before Alex transferred to the specialized K9 program. They remained close. She handed Sophia a military identification card. This will get you onto Fort Carson tomorrow morning. Colonel Harrison will meet you there. Sophia stared at the ID. You want me to take the message? What about Valor and Scout? I'll ensure they remain here under my care. Agent Blackwood is pushing for their transfer to a DoD facility, but my authorization will hold for at least 48 hours. Major Chen's expression grew grave. Whatever Alex was involved in, it's significant enough that multiple agencies are intersecting. I don't think all of them have his best interests or national security as their priority. Sophia looked at Valor, who watched their exchange with unnerving attentiveness. What if Sergeant Winters regains consciousness while I'm gone? I'll monitor him personally. But Sophia, Major Chen leaned closer, I believe Valor led you to Alex for a reason beyond immediate rescue. The fact that you found that coded message, that Valor allowed you to access it, suggests he's following his handler's contingency protocols. You think Sergeant Winters instructed the dog to find help that wasn't military or law enforcement? Sophia realized. Someone outside his chain of command. Exactly. A neutral party. Someone who would act on humanitarian instinct rather than operational directives. Sophia considered this, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. For 3 years, she'd avoided complex situations, retreating to the relative simplicity of forest management after her police career ended in disillusionment. Now, she was voluntarily stepping into what appeared to be a high-level military intelligence situation. Why me? She asked, more to herself than Major Chen. Valor rose from his bed, limping to Sophia's side. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with dignity, pressing his muzzle against her hand. The gesture felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. I think he's answering your question, Major Chen said softly. These dogs are trained to assess threats and allies with an accuracy that sometimes exceeds human judgment. Valor chose you. The dog's amber eyes held Sophia's gaze unflinching. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding beyond words, a commitment that transcended their brief acquaintance. I'll do it, Sophia said, decision crystallizing. First thing tomorrow. Major Chen nodded. I've arranged civilian clothes for you. Leave your uniform here, it's too identifiable. And Sophia, she added, her voice dropping, be careful. Whatever Alex discovered, people are willing to go to extraordinary lengths to contain it. That night, Sophia slept on a cot in the veterinary recovery room, unwilling to leave the dogs alone. Her dreams were fragmented, running through forests, following shadowy figures, hearing whispers just beyond comprehension. She woke before dawn, finding Valor already alert, watching her from his bed. "You don't miss much, do you?" she murmured, stretching stiff muscles. The dog blinked slowly, his expression somehow conveying agreement. Sophia moved to check on Scout, finding the younger dog's condition improved, his breathing easier after a night of proper medical care. Major Chen arrived with coffee and a bag containing civilian clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, hiking boots, and a weathered jacket. "These should help you blend in. There's a commercial bus that stops near Fort Carson at 09:30. This will cover your fare and expenses." She handed Sophia an envelope containing cash. "How's Sergeant Winters?" Sophia asked, accepting the envelope. "Still unconscious, but his vitals are improving. The infection is responding to treatment." Major Chen hesitated. "Blackwood's people are maintaining continuous presence outside his room. They've restricted all visitor access. Even medical staff are being monitored." Sophia changed into the civilian clothes, tucking the coded message securely in an inner pocket. As she prepared to leave, she knelt beside Valor, who watched her preparations with focused attention. "I'll be back," she promised quietly. "Look after Scout and your handler." Valor nudged her hand with his muzzle, then returned to his sentinel position, eyes trained on the door. The dog's unwavering focus and determination despite his injuries stirred something profound in Sophia, a reminder of what commitment truly looked like when stripped of ego and excuses. Major Chen walked her to a side entrance of the hospital, avoiding the main lobbies where Blackwood's agents might be watching. "Colonel Harrison will meet you at the visitor center. The bus stops 2 blocks away. Don't contact me electronically. We have to assume communications may be monitored." Sophia nodded, zipping the jacket against the early morning chill. "Take care of them, Major." "Diana," the Major corrected with a small smile, "I think we've moved beyond formalities." Sophia returned the smile, feeling the first tendrils of genuine connection she'd experienced in years. "Thank you, Diana." The morning air was crisp and clean as Sophia walked away from the hospital, her ranger identity temporarily shed. Each step took her further from the structured life she'd built for herself after leaving law enforcement, a life designed to minimize complexity and human entanglement. Yet instead of anxiety, she felt a growing sense of purpose. Valor had recognized something in her that she'd forgotten existed, a core of integrity and determination that had been buried beneath years of institutional disappointment and self-protective isolation. The coded message rested against her ribs, its physical presence a reminder of the trust placed in her by a dog whose intelligence and loyalty transcended conventional understanding. Whatever Sergeant Winters had discovered, whatever had driven him to hide in the wilderness with his loyal companions, Sophia was now part of that story. As she reached the bus stop, Sophia realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't simply going through the motions of a job. She was pursuing something that mattered, not because regulations demanded it, but because integrity required it. Valor had shown her what unwavering commitment looked like in its purest form. Now it was her turn to demonstrate that humans were capable of the same loyalty and courage that came so naturally to a dog who had never abandoned his mission, even when the odds seemed impossible. The commercial bus rumbled along the highway, carrying Sophia toward Fort Carson, along with commuters, students, and a handful of soldiers returning from weekend leave. She sat near the back, gazing out the window as urban sprawl gradually gave way to the more familiar landscape of eastern Colorado's rolling terrain. The coded message from Valor's collar rested against her skin, tucked securely in an inner pocket. Its physical presence was a constant reminder of the extraordinary circumstances that had pulled her from the relative simplicity of forest management into something far more complex. 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been navigating her probationary status with the Forest Service. Now she was carrying what might be classified military intelligence to meet with a lieutenant colonel she'd never met. Sophia had spent years building walls around herself after leaving law enforcement. Walls designed to minimize risk, avoid institutional entanglements, and prevent the kind of disappointment that had driven her from a career she'd once believed in. The remote ranger position at Black Ridge had been perfect, clear rules, minimal oversight, and more trees than people. Yet in the space of a single encounter with a wounded military dog, those carefully constructed boundaries had crumbled. The bus pulled into the Colorado Springs terminal just after 9. Sophia stepped into the morning sunshine, orienting herself before heading toward the taxi stand. Fort Carson lay just a few miles away, its sprawling military complex housing over 25,000 soldiers and supporting personnel. "Fort Carson Visitor Center," she told the driver, settling into the back seat. The taxi wound through city streets before turning onto the highway that approached the military installation. Sophia watched the mountain backdrop growing larger through the windshield, the iconic Pikes Peak dominating the western horizon. The familiar landscape grounded her, providing a sense of place amid the increasingly unfamiliar territory she was navigating. At the visitor center, Sophia paid the driver and stepped out, surveying the bustling entrance to one of the country's largest army installations. Soldiers in uniforms moved with purpose between buildings, while civilian employees and family members created a diverse human ecosystem. The scale of the operation was imposing, a reminder of the powerful institutions involved in whatever Sergeant Winters had uncovered. Sophia approached the visitor center, the military ID from Major Chen tucked in her hand. Before she reached the entrance, a man in civilian clothes intercepted her path. Tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped grey hair, he carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of career military, despite his jeans and button-down shirt. "Ranger Reyes?" he asked quietly, his voice low and controlled. Sophia tensed, immediately wary. "Who's asking?" "Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison," he replied, showing her his military ID briefly before returning it to his pocket. Diana called ahead. "We shouldn't talk here." He guided her away from the visitor center toward a coffee shop across the street from the base. Once inside, he selected a table in the back corner where they could speak without being overheard, positioning himself with a clear view of both the entrance and the window facing the street. "Diana mentioned you came into contact with Alex Winters and his dogs," Harrison began once they were seated with coffee. His eyes, sharp and assessing, studied her with military precision. "Tell me what happened, exactly as you remember it." Sophia recounted the events in the forest. Valor's appearance on the road, the hike to the shelter, finding Sergeant Winters and Scout. She described the crude survival setup, the condition of both humans and dogs, and the subsequent medical evacuation. Harrison listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing. "And Agent Blackwood's involvement?" he prompted when she finished. "He arrived at the hospital shortly after we did, seemed more interested in whether Winters had equipment or documents than in his medical condition." Sophia hesitated, then added, "He was pushing to have the dogs transferred to a DoD facility immediately, despite their injuries." Harrison's jaw tightened slightly, the first hint of emotion he'd displayed. "That's consistent with how they've handled this from the beginning." "Which is how, exactly?" Sophia asked. Harrison studied her for a moment, clearly weighing how much to share. "Alex Winters disappeared 3 weeks ago during approved leave. His unit reported him missing when he failed to return to base. Standard procedures were initiated, but the search was called off after just 5 days, unusually quick for a decorated soldier with his background. Diana mentioned he worked with intelligence operations. Alex was part of a specialized K-9 program, focusing on advanced scent detection and information security applications, Harrison confirmed. His dogs were trained for capacities beyond standard military protocols, recognizing electronic signatures, identifying specific chemical compounds, even distinguishing between encryption systems by scent. Sophia thought of Valor's extraordinary behavior, his deliberate communication, his assessment of her as a potential ally. That explains some things, but not why he was hiding in a national forest with an infected wound. That's what I'm trying to determine. Harrison leaned forward slightly. 2 months ago, Alex contacted me, said he discovered something during his last deployment that concerned him, something he couldn't report through normal channels. We arranged to meet, but he never showed. 3 days later, he was officially listed as AWOL. You think whatever he discovered put him at risk from his own side? Harrison's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes hardened. I think there are elements within our intelligence apparatus that operate with insufficient oversight. Alex was a patriot in the truest sense, committed to the Constitution above all else. If he went dark, he had good reason. Sophia reached into her inner pocket and withdrew the folded paper. Diana thought you might be able to decode this. It was hidden in Valor's collar. Harrison accepted the paper carefully, unfolding it, to examine the sequence of numbers and letters. His expression remained controlled, but Sophia caught the slight widening of his eyes. This is Alex's personal cipher, he confirmed quietly. We developed it during deployment for communication outside official channels. It would take someone who knew him very well to recognize it, let alone decrypt it. Can you read it? Harrison refolded the paper, his movements precise. Not here. I need specific reference materials that are secure. But this confirms my suspicions. Alex was implementing emergency protocols he and I established years ago. What kind of emergency protocols? The kind designed for situations where the chain of command itself might be compromised. Harrison's voice remained low and steady, but the gravity of his words was unmistakable. Alex trained Valor with specific contingency responses that would activate only under certain conditions. Sophia considered this. You're saying Valor was following instructions to find help outside military or law enforcement channels? That he specifically sought out someone like me? A forest ranger represents neutral authority, someone with outdoor skills and emergency training, but no direct connection to military or intelligence establishments. Harrison nodded approvingly. The dog's assessment of you as a viable ally was evidently correct. His intelligence is remarkable, Sophia acknowledged, far beyond what I would have expected, even from a military working dog. Valor and Scout represent the pinnacle of canine operational capability, Harrison said, but what makes them truly exceptional isn't their training, it's their bond with Alex. He approached their development differently than standard handlers, treated them as partners rather than assets. Sophia thought of how Valor had maintained his protective watch over Sergeant Winters and Scout, despite his own injuries. It shows. Harrison checked his watch. I need to take this message to a secure location for decryption. In the meantime, I want you to return to the hospital. Diana will ensure you have access, but maintain your cover as a concerned ranger checking on the dog's welfare. What about Blackwood? Avoid direct engagement, if possible. If questioned, stick to your original story. You found them, helped with rescue, and developed a connection with the dogs during recovery. Harrison's expression grew more serious. But be careful. The fact that Alex went to these lengths suggests whatever he discovered is significant enough to justify extraordinary measures by those who want it contained. Sophia nodded, absorbing the weight of the situation. When will I hear from you? I'll make contact within 24 hours once I've decoded the message. Harrison rose from his seat. One more thing. If Alex regains consciousness, there's a phrase that will let him know you're connected to me. Sandstorm Guardian. It was our unit's unofficial call sign in Afghanistan. After Harrison departed, Sophia remained at the table, processing the conversation. The pieces were beginning to align, forming a picture more complex and troubling than she'd initially imagined. Whatever Sergeant Winters had discovered, it had driven him to implement elaborate contingency plans involving his extraordinarily trained dogs. The bus ride back to the hospital gave Sophia time to think. Her training as a ranger had taught her to read wilderness landscapes, to see patterns, anticipate dangers, identify resources. Now she needed to apply those same skills to a very different terrain, one of military hierarchies, intelligence operations, and potential internal threats. By late afternoon, Sophia was back at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, having texted Diana her arrival time using the coded phrase they'd established, checking on trail conditions. Diana met her at a side entrance, quickly escorting her through service corridors to avoid the main lobbies where Blackwood's people might be watching. "Any change in Sergeant Winters' condition?" Sophia asked as they walked. "He's showing signs of increased brain activity," Diana replied. "Doctors think he might regain consciousness within the next day or two. Blackwood has 2 agents posted outside his room at all times. And the dogs, see for yourself." Diana led her into the veterinary recovery room where Valor and Scout were being kept. Sophia was immediately struck by the difference in Scout, who stood alert in his kennel, his eyes brighter and more focused than the previous day. Valor lay on his bed, but rose immediately when Sophia entered, his posture conveying recognition despite his continued physical discomfort. "They're recovering remarkably well," Diana explained, checking Scout's bandages. "Military working dogs are bred and trained for exceptional resilience, but their progress has surprised even me." Sophia moved to Valor, kneeling to greet him properly. The dog approached her with deliberate dignity, allowing her to gently examine his healing wounds. His amber eyes studied her with that same unnerving intelligence she'd noticed from their first encounter. "You found Colonel Harrison?" Diana asked quietly, her back to the door as she pretended to check Scout's medical chart. "Yes." He recognized the code system immediately, said it was something he and Winters developed during deployment. Sophia kept her voice low, maintaining the appearance of simply checking on the dogs. "He's decrypting the message now." "Good. In the meantime, I've been doing some research into Sergeant Winters' history." Diana handed Sophia a clipboard with what appeared to be medical notes, but contained additional information written in small text between standard entries. His last deployment was to a classified location, officially labeled as a training mission in Allied territory. Whatever happened, there he returned and was immediately assigned to a specialized program under Joint Special Operations Command. Sophia pretended to review the medical notes while reading Diana's actual information. "Any indication what the program involved?" "Nothing specific, but there are connections to a defense contractor called Axiom Dynamics. They specialize in next-generation intelligence gathering systems, including enhanced capabilities for working dogs." The name triggered a memory from Sophia's police days. Axiom was developing facial recognition systems for law enforcement when I was on the force. There were concerns about oversight and data security. Those concerns apparently didn't slow their military contracts, Diana noted. They've received over $300 million in DoD funding for classified programs in the last 3 years. Sophia returned the clipboard, her mind connecting patterns. And Agent Blackwood's interest? He's not standard DoD investigation division. I made some discreet inquiries. He's attached to a special projects oversight group with direct reporting lines outside normal military chains of command. Diana's expression grew troubled. Whatever Alex stumbled upon, it's connected to projects with very high-level protection. Vala had remained close to Sophia during this exchange, his attention divided between her conversation with Diana and the door to the recovery room. Now he moved to the door, his posture alerting subtly before. A knock sounded. He heard someone coming, Sophia murmured, impressed once again by the dog's awareness. A hospital administrator entered, looking uncomfortable. Major Chen, Agent Blackwood is requesting access to the dogs for assessment by his own veterinary specialist. Diana straightened, her professional demeanor firmly in place. These animals are under military veterinary jurisdiction per the authorization I showed Agent Blackwood yesterday. He's insisting, Major, says he has new orders from the Pentagon directly authorizing his team to evaluate and potentially transfer the dogs to a specialized facility. Sophia watched Vala's reaction to this conversation. The dog had positioned himself between Scout's kennel and the door, his stance protective despite his injuries. Even more telling was the way he occasionally looked to Sophia, as if gauging her response to the developing situation. In that moment, something crystallized in Sophia's understanding. These weren't just extraordinarily trained animals. They were partners who had been entrusted with a mission of genuine importance. Vala hadn't just sought help for his handler. He had assessed Sophia as someone who could be trusted to assist in whatever Sergeant Winters had been trying to accomplish before he was injured. She had spent years retreating from complex human entanglements, seeking the relative simplicity of forest management. Now she was being drawn into what appeared to be a high-level intelligence situation, with powerful interests aligned against a wounded soldier and his remarkable dogs. The easy path would be to step back, to tell Diana she couldn't get further involved, but looking at Vala's unwavering commitment despite pain and adversity, Sophia recognized that the easy path wasn't always the right one. Tell Agent Blackwood that as the civilian who initially located these dogs, I've filed a witness statement regarding their condition upon discovery, Sophia said, stepping forward. Any transfer or additional assessment should wait until Colonel Harrison from Army Intelligence reviews the situation, given Sergeant Winters' specialized assignment history. The administrator blinked in surprise at her assertiveness, while Diana shot her an approving glance. I'll convey your concerns, the administrator said cautiously before withdrawing. When the door closed, Diana turned to Sophia with raised eyebrows. Invoking Harrison's name is a bold move. Vala didn't lead me through miles of wilderness, so these dogs could be whisked away by whoever Blackwood really represents, Sophia replied, a new resolve strengthening her voice. Whatever Sergeant Winters discovered, he trusted his dogs to carry it forward. I'm not going to let that trust be wasted. As if in response to her words, Vala moved to her side, his posture straight despite his injuries, his eyes meeting hers, with what could only be described as affirmation. In that silent exchange, Sophia felt the foundations of something important being built. A partnership based not on institutional authority, but on shared purpose and mutual respect. The Forest, Ranger who had chosen isolation after institutional disappointment, was rediscovering what it meant to stand for something larger than herself. And her teachers were a wounded soldier she'd never spoken to, and a dog whose extraordinary courage had cut through years of carefully constructed emotional distance. Night had settled over the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, the corridors quieter. As the day shift departed and evening routines took hold, Sophia sat in a small break room adjacent to the veterinary recovery area, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee while reviewing hospital blueprints Diana had procured. The confrontation with Blackwood's authority had bought them time, but both women recognized it was temporary. Whatever protection Diana's military veterinary authorization provided would likely be overridden by morning. "Winter's room is here," Diana said quietly, indicating a section of the medical wing on the 3rd floor. 2 guards posted at all times, rotating shifts every 6 hours. Medical staff are being monitored during all interactions. Sophia studied the layout, noting emergency exits and service corridors. "And you said he's showing signs of regaining consciousness?" "Increased brain activity, better responsiveness to stimuli. The doctors are optimistic." Diana glanced toward the recovery room where Valor and Scout rested. "The problem is, Blackwood's people will be the first to know when he wakes up. Whatever Alex knows, they'll get to it before we can." Sophia considered this. "Unless we move him." Diana raised an eyebrow. "That's extreme. He's still in serious condition, despite the improvement." "I'm not suggesting we disconnect him from medical care," Sophia clarified. "But there must be options beyond this facility, somewhere Blackwood has less control." The conversation paused as Diana's phone buzzed. She checked the message, her expression shifting subtly. "Harrison's on his way. Says he needs to speak with us immediately." Within the hour, Harrison arrived through the same service entrance Sophia had used earlier. His military bearing remained intact, but subtle signs of tension showed in the tightness around his eyes and the careful precision of his movements. "You decoded the message?" Sophia asked, once they had secured the break room door. Harrison nodded, retrieving a notebook from his jacket. "Coordinates in Blackridge National Forest, about 12 miles from where you found Alex, plus a sequence of authentication codes for a secure digital storage device." "What's at the coordinates?" Diana asked. "I sent a trusted contact to check carefully from a distance." Harrison's expression grew grim. "Evidence of a recently abandoned research facility. Temporary structures, hastily removed equipment, signs of rapid evacuation." Sophia frowned. "In a national forest? That's federal land. Any research or construction would require permits, environmental impact studies." "Exactly," Harrison confirmed. "Yet there's no record of authorized activity in that sector. Whatever was happening there was completely off the books." "Axiom Dynamics," Diana said quietly. "The defense contractor I mentioned earlier." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Alex's message confirms it. He discovered an unauthorized testing facility operating under Axiom's black budget programming. But the real issue is what they were testing." "Which was," Sophia prompted, "advanced chemical compounds designed to enhance cognitive capabilities in specialized military working dogs." Harrison glanced toward the recovery room, where Valor and Scout rested. "Experimental neuropharmacology with the potential for applications beyond canine subjects." Sophia processed this information, connecting it to what she'd observed in Valor's behavior. They were experimenting on military dogs without authorization. "Worse," Harrison replied, "they were developing compounds that showed potential for human neural enhancement, using military working dogs as the testing ground, bypassing both animal welfare regulations and human clinical trial requirements in one operation." Diana's medical training immediately registered the implications. That's not just unethical, it's potentially catastrophic. Neural enhancement compounds without proper testing could cause permanent brain damage, psychosis, even death. According to Alex's message, the program directors were accelerating toward human trials, despite alarming results in some of the test subjects, Harrison continued. Dogs exhibiting unpredictable behavior, neurological damage, even evidence of permanent psychological alteration. Sophia thought of Valor's extraordinary intelligence, his assessment capabilities, his seemingly human comprehension. What about Valor and Scout? Were they test subjects? Harrison shook his head. Alex's message indicates they were control subjects, part of the baseline comparison group. They received enhanced training, but no experimental compounds. When Alex discovered what was happening with the other dogs, he gathered evidence, but realized the program had protection from high levels within military intelligence. So he went outside the chain of command, Sophia concluded. And when they realized what he'd done, they initiated containment protocols, Harrison finished. Alex anticipated this. He took his dogs and the evidence he'd gathered and disappeared into Blackridge Forest. But something went wrong, Diana said. The injury to his leg, Scout getting wounded. The message doesn't specify, but it suggests pursuit. Alex believed he was being tracked by specialized units with orders to recover both the evidence and the dogs. Harrison's voice remained steady, but Sophia caught the anger underlying his professional tone. Dogs and evidence, in that priority order, not the man. Sophia felt a chill. They valued the dogs more than the soldier handling them. Valor and Scout represent millions in development investment, plus their training gives them unique cognitive capabilities. In cold operational terms, they're considered irreplaceable assets. Harrison's disgust at this calculation was evident. Alex, despite his specialized skills, remains merely human in their assessment. The irony struck Sophia forcefully. A program designed to enhance military capabilities had reduced its human operators to expendable components while elevating their canine partners to protected asset status. Yet it was the human, Sergeant Winters, who had demonstrated true loyalty by risking everything to protect both his dogs and expose the unethical research. "What about the evidence Alex gathered?" Diana asked. "If we could access it, we could expose the program." "The coordinates lead to a cache location," Harrison explained, "but extracting it requires Valor's direct participation." Sophia and Diana exchanged puzzled looks. "Alex implemented specialized security protocols," Harrison continued. "The evidence is stored in a biometrically sealed container that requires both his authorization and Valor's unique identifiers." "The dog is literally the key," Sophia realized. "Precisely. Alex trained Valor to activate the authentication sequence, a combination of specific behaviors that cannot be coerced or simulated." Harrison's respect was evident. "It's brilliantly secure. Even if Blackwood's people find the location, they can't access the evidence without Valor's willing participation. Which explains their determination to gain custody of the dogs," Diana said. "But they'd still need Alex to complete the authentication, wouldn't they?" Harrison's expression darkened. "Not necessarily. The final part of Alex's message warns that Axiom has developed methods to extract behavioral patterns from military working dogs through specialized conditioning techniques. Given enough time with Valor, they might eventually break the security protocols." The implications settled heavily in the room. Whatever Sergeant Winters had discovered was significant enough to justify extraordinary measures by powerful interests. His injured condition and unconscious state had temporarily prevented Blackwood from obtaining direct information, but the dogs, especially Valor, represented a vulnerability in his carefully constructed security measures. "We need to move." "Them," Sophia said with newfound conviction. "All three of them, Winters and both dogs." "Before Blackwood secures the authorization to override Diana's veterinary jurisdiction." Harrison nodded slowly. "I've been considering options. Winter's medical condition complicates matters, but I have contacts at a private medical facility about 60 miles from here. Former military doctor who runs a rehabilitation center for wounded veterans. He has the capabilities to handle Alex's condition." "And the dogs?" Diana asked. The facility includes service dog training programs. They would have the resources to care for Valor and Scout while maintaining cover. Sophia considered the logistics. Blackwood has people watching all the main exits. How do we move a critically injured patient and 2 military dogs without being detected? Before Harrison could respond, movement at the door caught their attention. Valor had somehow opened the recovery room door and now stood in the doorway, his amber eyes assessing the 3 humans. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with quiet dignity, his presence commanding the room without sound or motion. "How did he—" Diana began. "Advanced training," Harrison replied, though his expression revealed surprise at this particular demonstration. Military working dogs at their level can manipulate basic door mechanisms. Valor entered the break room, moving directly to the blueprints spread across the table. His focus on the hospital layout was unmistakable, his intelligence evident in the deliberate way he studied the documents. "He understands what we're discussing," Sophia said softly, the realization both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Harrison watched the dog with renewed respect. Alex always said Valor's comprehension exceeded standard parameters, even for specialized units. I thought he was exaggerating. Valor's attention shifted to a service corridor on the blueprint, a route connecting the veterinary wing to the loading dock at the rear of the hospital complex. He placed a paw precisely on the path, then looked up at Sophia with unmistakable intent. "He's suggesting an evacuation route," Sophia said, amazement coloring her voice. "One that would bypass the main corridors where Blackwood's people are stationed." Diana studied the indicated path. "That corridor is used for supply deliveries in the early morning. Minimal staff, no security checkpoints. We would still need a medical transport vehicle equipped for critical care," Harrison noted. "And authorization for patient transfer." Diana's expression shifted as an idea formed. "I can arrange both. My veterinary authorization includes transport capabilities for military working dogs. With some creative documentation, I could extend that to include their handler as medically necessary for the dog's well-being." "Would it hold up to scrutiny?" Sophia asked. "Long enough to get them out of the building," Diana replied. "Once they're off-site, Harrison's contacts can take over." Valor had remained focused on their planning, his attention shifting between the humans as they spoke. Now he returned to the recovery room door, looking back expectantly. "I think he wants us to see something," Sophia said, following the dog. In the recovery room, Scout had improved enough to stand at attention when they entered. The younger dog's recuperation was remarkable, his eyes alert despite the bandages still covering parts of his body. Valor moved to a small cabinet in the corner, pawing at the lower drawer. Diana opened it, revealing standard veterinary supplies. "What is he looking for?" Valor nudged aside several packages, exposing a small metal case secured with a digital lock. The case wasn't hospital property. Its military-grade construction immediately identified it as something Sergeant Winters must have been carrying when Sophia found him. "That wasn't in the inventory of his possessions," Diana said carefully, removing the case. "Because it wasn't with his personal effects," Sophia realized. "It was hidden here, in the veterinary supplies." Harrison examined the case without touching it. Military-grade secure storage, biometric lock, designed for field operations where sensitive materials need protection. "Can we open it?" Diana asked. "Not without Alex's authentication," Harrison replied. "These systems are designed to destroy contents if tampered with." Valor nudged Sophia's hand, then moved to Scout. The younger dog stepped forward, turning to present his collar to Sophia. Unlike Valor's tactical collar with its hidden compartment, Scout's collar appeared standard until Valor used his teeth to carefully pull at a section of the material, revealing a hidden seam. Sophia gently parted the layers of the collar, finding a small metal disc concealed within. "What is this?" Harrison's eyebrows rose in recognition. "Emergency authentication key. Special operations teams sometimes use them when standard biometric access is compromised." The disc bore no visible markings, just a smooth metallic surface with a slightly raised edge. Harrison carefully placed it against the digital lock on the case, aligning it precisely with the reader. After a moment, the lock emitted a soft tone, and the case opened with a pneumatic hiss. Inside lay a compact data storage device and a handwritten note. Harrison read the note silently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Alex documented everything," he said finally. "Test protocols, subjects, results, authorization chains, funding sources, names of military and intelligence officials who approved the program despite knowing its ethical violations." He looked up, his expression grim. "Including Blackwood's real role, not investigation, but containment of potential exposure." "So we have evidence," Sophia said. "Enough to stop them?" "If we can get it to the right people," Harrison confirmed. "But the same powerful interests that authorize this program will do everything possible to prevent exposure. We're talking about career-ending violations of military ethics, potential criminal charges." The situation crystallized for Sophia. With sudden clarity, this wasn't just about rescuing a wounded soldier and his remarkable dogs. It was about exposing corruption that reached into the highest levels of military intelligence, corruption that had permitted unethical experimentation in pursuit of enhanced warfare capabilities. The community that had been forming around Sergeant Winters and his dogs, Sophia, Diana, Harrison, and potentially others, now faced a challenge that exceeded individual capabilities. They would need to trust each other, combine their unique skills, and work together to protect both the evidence and the lives at stake. Valor stood beside Sophia, his posture conveying readiness despite his injuries. In the dog's unwavering commitment, she found inspiration that transcended her former. Cynicism about institutions and authority. Systems might be corrupted, but individual integrity remained possible, as demonstrated by Sergeant Winters' willingness to risk everything to expose wrongdoing, and by Valor's extraordinary loyalty to both mission and handler. "We move them. Tonight," Sophia decided, meeting Harrison's gaze with newfound resolve. "All three of them with the evidence, before Blackwood realizes what we've found." As if in affirmation, Valor pressed against her leg, his solid presence a reminder of the remarkable partnership that had brought them to this moment. The forest ranger who had once sought isolation to avoid institutional disappointment now found herself at the center of a growing alliance, drawn together by a dog whose intelligence and loyalty transcended conventional understanding. In Valor's eyes, Sophia recognized something that had been missing in her life since leaving law enforcement. Purpose greater than self-preservation, commitment stronger than cynicism, and the courage to stand for principles even when powerful. Forces aligned against them. The hospital corridors took on an otherworldly quality in the pre-dawn hours, their sterile fluorescence creating sharp shadows and hushed echoes. Sophia moved with practiced stealth through the service pathway Valor had identified, her ranger training evident in each deliberate step. The military-grade case containing Sergeant Winters' evidence was secured in a backpack she wore. Its weight, a physical reminder of the responsibility she had accepted. Diana had gone ahead to prepare the medical transport vehicle, a specialized ambulance ostensibly requisitioned for transferring military working dogs to a veterinary rehabilitation facility. Harrison was coordinating from outside the hospital, ensuring their route remained clear once they left the building. The true complexity of their mission lay not in the physical logistics, but in moving Sergeant Winters without compromising his medical care. His condition had stabilized but remained serious. The transfer would involve risks that went beyond potential discovery by Blackwood's agents. Sophia reached the third-floor medical wing where Winters was being treated, using the service key Diana had provided to access the staff corridor that ran behind the patient rooms. According to the blueprints, this would allow her to approach Winters' room from the opposite direction of the stationed guards. Valor moved silently beside her, his training evident in his precise movements despite his injuries. Scout followed several paces behind, still recovering but determined to participate in the mission. The dog's awareness of operational security was remarkable. Neither had made a sound since leaving the veterinary wing. Sophia paused at the juncture where the service corridor connected to the medical ward. The next phase required perfect timing. Diana had arranged for a false alarm in a distant wing of the hospital that would temporarily draw at least one of the guards from Winters' door. The remaining guard would be Sophia's responsibility. Her phone vibrated once. Diana's signal that the diversion was in place. Sophia took a deep breath, centering herself as she had during high-risk operations in her police days. Then she nodded to Valor, who understood immediately what was required. The dog moved ahead of her, emerging into the main corridor with a convincingly disoriented manner, limping more pronouncedly, head lowered as if confused. The performance was so effective that Sophia momentarily forgot it was calculated. The guard stationed outside Winters' room straightened immediately, his hand moving to his sidearm as he registered the unexpected presence of a military working dog outside containment. "Hey! Stop right there!" he called, attention fully engaged. "On Valor. How did you get out?" Sophia used the distraction to emerge from the service door behind the guard, moving swiftly and silently. Before he could react to Valor's presence, she had applied precise pressure to the carotid artery using a technique from her police training. The guard slumped unconscious, and Sophia carefully lowered him to the floor. "Nice work," she murmured. To Valor, who had already abandoned his disoriented act and now stood at full attention. She secured the unconscious guard with medical restraints from her pack, positioning him in a supply closet where he wouldn't be immediately discovered. The door to Winters' room was secured with a keycard lock. Sophia used the medical override card Diana had provided, accessing the darkened room with minimal sound. Inside, monitoring equipment created a soft electronic backdrop of beeps and hums. Sergeant Winters lay connected to IV lines and monitoring sensors. His appearance significantly improved from when Sophia had found him in the forest, but still bearing the marks of his ordeal. Valor moved immediately to his handler's bedside. Scout, following close behind, the dogs positioned themselves on either side of the bed, their posture protective yet anticipatory. Valor gently nudged Winters' hand with his muzzle, a gesture both affectionate and purposeful. To Sophia's surprise, Winters' fingers twitched in response. His eyes remained closed, but the movement was deliberate, not reflexive. Valor repeated the contact, and this time Winters' hand moved to rest on the dog's head. "Sergeant Winters," Sophia said softly, approaching the bed, "can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they registered the dogs beside him, then Sophia's unfamiliar presence. Though conscious, he clearly remained weakened by his ordeal. "Who?" His voice emerged as a rasp, throat dry from days without use. "Sophia Reyes, Blackridge Forest Ranger," she explained quickly, checking the corridor through the doorway. "Valor found me in the forest 4 days ago. I'm working with Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, Sandstorm Guardian." The recognition in Winters' eyes was immediate at the code phrase. His gaze shifted to Valor, who maintained his position by the bed, then to Scout, whose recovery was evident despite remaining bandages. "They made it," he whispered, relief washing over his features. "They did more than make it. Sophia replied, working efficiently to disconnect the monitoring equipment in the specific sequence Diana had instructed. Valor implemented your contingency protocols perfectly. He found me, led me to you, protected. The evidence. We've decoded your message and secured the data. Winters nodded weakly, clearly processing this information through the fog of his recovery. Blackwood. In the building. We don't have much time. Sophia began carefully removing the IV lines, replacing them with portable units from the medical pack Diana had prepared. We're moving you to a secure location. One of Harrison's contacts runs a private veterans medical facility. Can you travel? Winters attempted to sit up, grimacing with the effort. I'll manage. Easy, Sophia cautioned, supporting him. Your infection is under control, but you're still recovering from significant blood loss and exposure. The sound of footsteps in the corridor froze them both. Sophia moved silently to the door, peering through the narrow gap. The second guard had returned, discovered his missing colleague, and was now speaking urgently into his radio. Time had just run out. Change of plans, Sophia said, returning to the bed. We need to move now before reinforcements arrive. Valor had already positioned himself to provide support for his handler, understanding the situation with remarkable clarity. Scout moved to the door, taking up a watchful position that would allow him to alert them to approaching threat. With Sophia's assistance, Winters managed to stand, leaning heavily on her shoulder. The effort clearly cost him, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought waves of dizziness. Service elevator, he managed between labored breaths, gesturing toward the back of the room. Staff access. Sophia hadn't noticed the secondary door, camouflaged within the room's design to provide emergency medical evacuation routes. This changed their options significantly. Can you walk that far? She asked, concerned by Winter's pallor. With help, he replied, determination evident despite his weakness. He looked to Valor, who immediately positioned himself on Winter's other side, providing structural support with his body. The partnership between handler and dog transcended training, functioning now as intuitive cooperation. They moved slowly toward the hidden door, Winters gaining strength with each step as his body reactivated. Scout remained at lookout, his ears forward, body tensed for warning. Sophia accessed the service door with Diana's override card, revealing a small anteroom connected to a dedicated elevator for medical emergencies. This bypasses the main floors, Winters explained. His breathing labored but voice steadier, goes directly to the ambulance bay. Diana's waiting there with transport, Sophia confirmed, helping him into the elevator. The dogs followed without command, positioning themselves protectively around their handler. As the elevator began its descent, Winters leaned against the wall, studying Sophia with new clarity. Harrison told you what I found? Sophia nodded. Axiom's unauthorized testing program, the experimental compounds, the plans for human trials without proper protocols. It's worse than that, Winters said, his voice strengthening with urgency. The program wasn't just unauthorized, it was specifically prohibited by congressional oversight following earlier violations. Axiom circumvented the restrictions by classifying it as enhanced veterinary care for military working dogs. Hiding human neural enhancement research under the guise of animal care, Sophia summarized, disgust evident in her tone. The dogs were just the beginning, Winters continued. The compounds showed potential for creating enhanced cognitive capabilities, but with devastating long-term effects. Neurological degradation, personality alteration, eventual system failure. They were documenting these outcomes, but proceeding anyway. Valor pressed closer to his handler, as if understanding the conversation. Winters absently stroked the dog's head, the gesture automatic but deeply affectionate. What made you investigate in the first place? Sophia asked. One of my former dogs was transferred to the program, Winters replied, grief momentarily shadowing his features. Rex, 3 years of deployment together in Afghanistan. They told me he was being reassigned to a specialized training unit. 6 months later, I discovered he had died during routine training exercises. No details provided, all records classified. Sophia understood immediately. You didn't believe the official explanation. Military working dogs don't die in routine training, Winters said flatly. Not with their level of conditioning and preparation. I started asking questions, using my clearance to access veterinary records. What I found indicated systematic neural testing with experimental compounds, with Rex as one of the primary subjects. The elevator reached the ambulance bay level, doors opening to reveal Diana waiting with a gurney. She moved quickly to help. Winters from the elevator, her medical training evident in how she assessed his condition while assisting his transfer to the wheeled bed. Blackwood's people are mobilizing, she reported tersely. They discovered the guard about 3 minutes ago. Full lockdown protocols are initiating. The ambulance? Sophia asked, following as Diana wheeled Winters rapidly toward a military medical transport vehicle idling at the loading dock. Ready to go. All paperwork shows approved transfer of 2 military working dogs to rehabilitation facility with handler accompaniment for psychiatric support of the animals. Diana's preparations had been thorough, creating a paper trail that would temporarily withstand scrutiny. They reached the ambulance, where Harrison was waiting in the driver's seat, dressed in medical transport uniform. The rear doors stood open, the interior equipped for critical care transport. "Let's move," Harrison called, eyes scanning the emergency bay entrance, where security personnel had begun to appear. With practiced efficiency, Diana secured Winters on the transport gurney, while Sophia helped the dogs into the vehicle. Valor immediately positioned himself beside his handler, maintaining physical contact as if monitoring his condition. Scout took up position near the doors, his posture alert and protective despite his own recent injuries. Diana closed the doors and moved to the passenger seat as Sophia settled in the rear compartment with Winters and the dogs. The ambulance pulled away from the loading dock just as hospital security personnel began moving toward them, narrowly escaping confrontation. "They'll track the ambulance," Winters said, his voice stronger now that he was securely in transport. "Blackwood will have resources throughout the region." "We're not taking a direct route," Harrison called from the driver's seat. "I've arranged several vehicle transfers and alternate transportation. We'll be off the grid before they can establish a perimeter." As the ambulance navigated through early morning traffic, Sophia checked Winters' vital signs using the monitoring equipment. Diana had prepared. His condition remained stable, the movement apparently not compromising his recovery. "Why didn't you report what you found through official channels?" she asked, adjusting his IV flow. Winters' expression darkened. "I tried, first through my commanding officer, then through military intelligence oversight. Each time, my concerns were acknowledged, then buried. Reports vanished from systems. Investigations were closed without findings. I realized the program had protection at levels beyond my reach. So you gathered physical evidence," Sophia concluded. "Evidence they couldn't erase or suppress," Winters confirmed. "Field samples of the compounds, testing protocols, subject records, authorization chains. Enough to prove systematic violation of both military ethics and federal law." His gaze shifted to Valor, who maintained vigilant watch over his handler. "These dogs represent years of ethical training and partnership development. What Axiom was doing perverted everything that relationship stands for, turning sentient beings into expendable test subjects for profit-driven human enhancement." The fundamental ethical violation struck Sophia deeply. She had witnessed Valor's extraordinary intelligence, his capacity for assessment and decision-making that transcended conventional understanding of canine capabilities. The thought of such beings used as experimental subjects, their suffering documented but disregarded, filled her with a cold anger that crystallized her commitment to their mission. "We'll get your evidence to people who can act on it," she promised. "Harrison has contacts in military oversight committees who operate outside the intelligence community's influence." Winters nodded, though fatigue was beginning to overtake him again. "The fight isn't over," he said, voice growing fainter. "Blackwood isn't just securing evidence, he's eliminating liability. Anyone with knowledge of the program becomes a potential exposure risk." The implications settled heavily in the ambulance. They weren't just transporting evidence of ethical violations. They were protecting Winter's life against those who would silence him permanently rather than risk exposure of the program. This realization represented a deeper challenge than Sophia had initially understood. What had begun as a rescue of an injured soldier and his remarkable dogs had evolved into opposition against powerful interests within the military intelligence establishment. The resources that could be deployed against them were substantial, the potential consequences severe. As the ambulance merged onto the highway, leaving the city behind, Sophia found herself reflecting on the extraordinary circumstances that had brought her to this moment. 4 days ago, she had been a forest ranger on probation, seeking simplicity and isolation after institutional disappointment. Now she was helping transport classified evidence of military ethics violations while evading government agents, drawn into this mission by a dog whose intelligence and loyalty had transcended conventional understanding. The easy path would have been to call animal control when Valor appeared on the forest road, to follow procedures rather than intuition, but something in the dog's deliberate communication had awakened her dormant sense of purpose, reminding her that sometimes the most important missions arrived unannounced, testing not just capability, but character. Valor maintained his vigilant position beside Winters, who had drifted into exhausted sleep. The dog's amber eyes met Sophia's across the narrow space, conveying an awareness that continued to astonish her. In that silent exchange, she recognized that this deeper challenge would require more than just physical evasion or tactical planning. It would demand moral courage to stand against corruption that had infected the very institutions designed to protect ethical boundaries. The forest ranger, who had once sought refuge from institutional failure, now found herself confronting that failure directly, inspired by the unwavering loyalty of a dog who had never abandoned his mission or his handler, even when the odds seemed impossible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mountain landscape as the medical transport ambulance wound its way along remote county roads. They had switched vehicles twice since leaving the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, abandoning the original ambulance at a predetermined location where Harrison's contact had provided an unmarked van, then transitioning to this less conspicuous medical transport bearing the logo of a private veterans care facility. Sophia monitored Sergeant Winter's vital signs while diligently recording each medication administration Diana had prescribed before they separated at the second transition point. The Major had returned to the hospital to maintain appearance of normalcy, potentially buying them crucial time before the full scope of their operation was discovered. "How much further?" Sophia asked, adjusting the IV drip that provided Winters with essential antibiotics and hydration. "Another 40 minutes, Harrison replied from the driver's seat, his attention divided between the winding road and the rear-view mirror. Dr. Levine's facility is just outside Miller's Creek, remote enough to avoid casual observation, but connected enough to provide proper medical care." Valor maintained his position beside his handler, displaying the vigilant patience that characterized military working dogs of his caliber. Scout had finally succumbed to fatigue, sleeping near Winter's feet, his recovering body requiring rest, despite his evident desire to remain on alert. Winters drifted between consciousness and sleep, his body still fighting infection and recovering from the ordeal in the forest. During brief periods of lucidity, he had shared additional details about Axiom's research program and the evidence he had collected, each revelation deepening Sophia's understanding of why powerful interests were determined to contain this situation. They're targeting the prefrontal cortex, he had explained during one such moment of clarity. The compounds are designed to enhance working memory, threat assessment, and decision-making under stress. Initial results showed remarkable improvement in cognitive processing until the degradation started. Degradation, Sophia had prompted, neural pathways breaking down, subjects experiencing increasing cognitive dissonance, personality fragmentation, eventually total systemic failure. Winter's voice had been clinical, despite the horror of what he described. The dogs, in advanced testing phases, began exhibiting erratic behavior, inability to process commands, neurological symptoms. When they documented these outcomes, but continued advancing toward human trials regardless, I knew I had to act. Now, as the ambulance traveled deeper into the mountain region, Sophia contemplated the personal cost this mission had already extracted from each participant. Winters had sacrificed his career, risked his life, and endured physical trauma to expose the unethical research. Harrison was leveraging decades of military credibility, potentially endangering his position by opposing classified operations from within. Diana had placed her medical career at risk by falsifying transfer documents and abetting their escape, and Sophia herself had abandoned the safety of procedural isolation she had cultivated for years. Her carefully constructed boundaries between professional obligation and personal investment had collapsed entirely since Valor had appeared on that forest road days ago. Her probationary status with the Forest Service was likely forfeit now, her absence during an assigned patrol period undoubtedly noted and reported. Yet as she observed Valor's unwavering dedication to his handler and mission, these sacrifices seemed not just necessary but honorable. The dog exemplified a purity of purpose that transcended institutional constraints or personal comfort, a standard that challenged human rationalization and compromise. The ambulance rounded a bend in the mountain road, revealing a sprawling facility nestled against the backdrop of pine-covered slopes. The Veterans Rehabilitation Center of Millers Creek presented an unassuming exterior, a former mountain resort converted to medical use, its rustic architecture blending naturally with the surrounding landscape. Harrison slowed as they approached, the security gate exchanging brief words with the guard before being waved through with minimal scrutiny. They followed a curved driveway to a side entrance marked Medical Receiving, where a man in scrubs waited alongside a woman in administrative attire. Dr. Levine, Harrison explained as they parked, and his administrative director, Sarah Chen, both former military, both trustworthy. The transfer occurred with efficient professionalism. Dr. Levine, a compact man with silver hair and the focused demeanor of a battle-tested field surgeon, immediately assessed Winter's condition while directing his staff to prepare appropriate accommodations. The administrative director handled documentation with similar precision, creating records that established Winters as a veteran receiving specialized care while participating in a service dog rehabilitation program. Most remarkable was the facility's immediate accommodation of Valor and Scout. Unlike the institutional resistance they had encountered at the VA hospital, Dr. Levine's staff treated the dogs as essential components of their patients' medical care, arranging appropriate space and resources without question. "We've prepared interconnected rooms," Dr. Levine explained as they moved Winters to a private medical suite. The main room is equipped for continued treatment of Sergeant Winters' condition, with adjacent space modified for the dog's needs and recovery. Sophia observed the thoughtful design of the space, a hospital room that somehow avoided the sterile impersonality of conventional medical facilities. Natural wood accents, large windows overlooking mountain vistas, and specialized accommodations. For service animals created an environment of healing rather than mere treatment. Once Winters was settled and his medical care transferred to Dr. Levine's capable supervision, Harrison led Sophia to a private office where they could speak securely. Dr. Levine was a JSOC medical officer before establishing this facility. Harrison explained, he understands operational security and the unique needs of special operations personnel. Winters and the dogs will receive excellent care here while remaining effectively off the grid. How long can we maintain this situation? Sophia asked, the reality of their circumstances settling more firmly with each passing hour. Blackwood has considerable resources, and we've technically abducted a military asset under investigation. Harrison's expression remained measured despite the gravity of her question. Winters is officially a patient who requested transfer to a specialized veterans facility with documentation approved by a military physician. Irregular, but not illegal. As for the dogs, their status is more complicated, but Dr. Levine's facility is certified for military working dog rehabilitation, which provides cover for their presence here. And the evidence? Harrison patted his jacket pocket where the secure data device from Winters' hidden case was now stored. I have contacts in the Inspector General's office who operate independent of intelligence community oversight. Once we verify and organize what Winters collected, we can present it through channels Blackwood can't easily control. Sophia nodded, processing this information. The immediate crisis of extracting Winters and the dogs from the hospital had been managed, but the larger conflict remained unresolved. Evidence required proper channels for action, and those channels would inevitably involve confrontation with the powerful interests protecting Axiom's research program. You should get some rest, Harrison suggested, noting Sophia's exhaustion. The facility has guest accommodations for families of patients. Dr. Levine has arranged a room for you. Sophia hesitated, reluctant to surrender vigilance despite her fatigue. What about you? I need to begin analyzing the evidence and making secure contact with my Inspector General connections. The sooner we establish protected disclosure protocols, the safer everyone involved will be. After Harrison departed, Sophia returned to Winters' medical suite to check on him and the dogs before seeking rest herself. She found the sergeant sleeping peacefully, his color significantly improved from earlier that day. The medical monitors showed stabilizing vital signs. Dr. Levine's interventions were clearly effective. Valor rose from his position near the bed as Sophia entered, approaching her with dignified recognition. Despite days of stress, injury, and operational demands, the dog's bearing remained commanding, his awareness undiminished. Scout, still recovering from more severe injuries, watched from his specialized bed in the corner, his posture more relaxed in this secure environment. You did it, Sophia said softly to Valor, kneeling to meet the dog at eye level. You protected. Your handler secured the evidence, completed the mission, against impossible odds. Valor's amber eyes held hers with that same unsettling intelligence she had recognized from their first encounter on the forest road. The dog placed a paw deliberately on her knee, not seeking attention, but establishing connection, acknowledging shared purpose. In that moment, Sophia confronted the full measure of personal cost this situation might yet demand. Her career as a forest ranger was likely compromised. Her carefully constructed isolation from institutional entanglements had been irreversibly breached. She had aligned herself against powerful government interests without the protection of official standing or authority. Yet as Valor maintained that deliberate contact, she recognized that some costs were worth paying, that integrity sometimes required sacrifice, that purpose transcended personal comfort or institutional affiliation. The dog's unwavering commitment, despite injury, fatigue, and danger, represented a standard that challenged her to overcome the cynicism that had defined her professional life since leaving law enforcement. A soft knock at the door broke the moment. Dr. Levine entered, carrying a tablet with medical records. "Ms. Reyes, I thought you might want an update on Sergeant Winter's condition." "How is he?" Sophia asked, rising to her feet as Valor returned to his position near his handler. "Remarkably resilient," the doctor replied, genuine respect evident in his tone. "The infection is responding well to targeted antibiotics. His vitals have stabilized, and cognitive function appears unaffected by the fever and exposure. I believe he'll make a full recovery, though proper rehabilitation will take time." Relief washed through Sophia, and the dogs. Dr. Levine smiled slightly, glancing at Valor. "Military working dogs of this caliber have conditioning and resilience beyond conventional veterinary parameters. Scout's lacerations are healing well, with no sign of complications. Valor's injuries were less severe physically, though I suspect he's been operating under considerable stress." "He hasn't left Winter's side since we found them," Sophia confirmed. "The bond between specialized operators and their canine partners transcends conventional understanding," Dr. Levine observed. "In my experience with special operations medicine, I've seen handlers continue missions with life-threatening injuries because their dogs needed them. And I've seen dogs perform beyond physical limitations to protect wounded handlers." He checked Winter's IV line with practiced efficiency. "These relationships represent the highest expression of mutual trust and commitment, something we humans could learn from more often." After the doctor left, Sophia found herself drawn to the large window overlooking the mountain landscape. Twilight was settling over the peaks, casting long purple shadows across the valleys. Somewhere beyond those mountains, Blackwood was undoubtedly mobilizing resources to locate them, securing authorization to expand his search, perhaps already developing narratives that would discredit Winter's evidence if it emerged publicly. The personal cost might grow steeper still before this mission was complete. Yet as Sophia watched the fading light paint the mountains with remarkable beauty, she recognized that some purposes were worthy of such cost, that the world contained both extraordinary corruption and extraordinary loyalty, and that neutrality between these forces was its own form of failure. "Rest now," she said softly to Valor as she prepared to seek her own quarters. "You've earned it more than any of us." The dog blinked slowly in acknowledgement, but maintained his vigilant position. Even here, in relative security, his commitment to his handler remained absolute. It was this quality, this purity of purpose, that had drawn Sophia irrevocably into their story from the moment Valor had appeared on that forest road. As she finally allowed exhaustion to overcome her in the simple guest quarters Dr. Levine had provided, Sophia reflected on how completely her life had transformed in less than a week. The forest ranger who had sought refuge from institutional disappointment in the isolation of Blackridge now found herself at the center of opposition to corruption within those very institutions. The personal cost was real and growing, but for the first time since leaving law enforcement, Sophia felt the satisfaction of alignment between action and principle, a clarity of purpose that transcended professional identity or institutional affiliation. Sometimes the most important commitments required the heaviest sacrifices. Valor had demonstrated this truth through every aspect of his extraordinary mission. Now it was the humans around him who needed to prove themselves worthy of the standard he had set. Dawn broke over the Veterans Rehabilitation Center with a clarity particular to mountain elevations. Sophia woke after 6 hours of profound sleep. The first uninterrupted rest she had experienced since Valor had appeared on that forest road. For a moment, the unfamiliar surroundings disoriented her, but the events of the past days quickly realigned in her consciousness. She showered and changed into fresh clothes provided by the facility's staff, then made her way to Winter's medical suite. The corridor bustled with activity as physical therapists, medical personnel, and administrative staff attended to the facility's primary mission of rehabilitation for wounded veterans. No one questioned her presence or authority as she moved through the building, Dr. Levine's acceptance having apparently extended throughout his organization. Inside Winter's suite, she found the sergeant awake and significantly improved. He sat propped against pillows, color returning to his face, eyes clear and focused for the first time since his rescue. Valor remained in his customary position beside the bed, while Scout had graduated from his recovery bed to a more active patrol of the room's perimeter. "Good morning," Sophia greeted, pleased by Winter's evident recovery. "You're looking better." "Amazing what proper medical care can accomplish," Winters replied, his voice stronger than the previous day. "Dr. Levine says the infection is responding well to the antibiotics. Another day or two, and I might be mobile." Sophia checked the monitoring equipment out of habit, confirming the improvement in vital signs. "Harrison is working with his contacts at the Inspector General's office. Once we organize your evidence properly, there's a pathway for protected disclosure." Winters nodded, though a shadow crossed his features. "Blackwood won't give up easily. Axiom has too much invested in that research program, and too many powerful people have compromised themselves authorizing it." "We're secure here for now," Sophia assured him, though she understood his concern. The relative safety of Dr. Levine's facility provided breathing room, but the fundamental conflict remained unresolved. A gentle knock interrupted their conversation. Dr. Levine entered, accompanied by a woman Sophia hadn't met, tall, African-American, with short gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Ms. Reyes, Sergeant Winters," Dr. Levine began. "This is Congresswoman Eleanor Whitfield. She serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Oversight Subcommittee." Sophia tensed immediately, her hand instinctively moving toward Valor in a protective gesture. The appearance of a high-ranking government official, even one from theoretical oversight, represented potential compromise of their secure location. The Congresswoman noted Sophia's reaction with approval, rather than offense. "Your caution is warranted, Ms. Reyes. In your position, I would react similarly." She turned to Winters. "Sergeant, I understand you've uncovered evidence of unauthorized experimental programs conducted by Axiom Dynamics under military contract." Winters exchanged a quick glance with Sophia before responding. "With respect, Congresswoman, how did you learn of our location and situation?" "Lieutenant Colonel Harrison contacted me directly," she replied. "We've worked together on several classified oversight matters in the past. When he indicated the nature of your evidence and the extraordinary measures taken to secure it, I felt personal involvement was warranted." Dr. Levine added, "Congresswoman Whitfield arrived by private vehicle without staff or security detail. Her presence here remains confidential." Sophia studied the Congresswoman with careful assessment. The woman's arrival represented both opportunity and risk, potential powerful advocacy, but also exposure to governmental channels that might be compromised. "Harrison mentioned your oversight role," Sophia acknowledged, "but given the high-level protection this program apparently enjoys, how can we be certain your committee isn't part of that protection?" Rather than taking offense, Congresswoman Whitfield smiled slightly, direct and prudent. 3 years ago, I led an investigation into Axiom's preliminary neural enhancement studies. Our findings resulted in explicit prohibition of further development, without rigorous ethical oversight and transparent protocols. If what Sergeant Winters has uncovered indicates they circumvented those restrictions, my interest is professional, personal, and absolute. Her expression hardened. When private contractors use military assets, human or canine, for unauthorized experimentation, they violate the most fundamental trust between our government and those who serve. I've spent 20 years on the Armed Services Committee fighting to protect that trust. Vala had been watching the Congresswoman intently throughout this exchange. Now, to Sophia's surprise, the dog rose and moved toward Whitfield, positioning himself directly before her. His posture conveyed neither aggression nor submission, but rather assessment, an evaluation of intent and character that transcended conventional canine behavior. Whitfield remained perfectly still, allowing this inspection without interference. After a long moment, Vala deliberately returned to his position near Winters, his body language suggesting acceptance rather than continued caution. "I believe I've passed inspection," the Congresswoman observed with quiet respect. Winters nodded slightly. Vala has exceptional assessment capabilities. He doesn't offer trust easily, particularly to government officials. "Understandably," Whitfield replied. "Now, if you're comfortable proceeding, I'd like to review the evidence you've collected. Colonel Harrison has provided preliminary summaries, but I need to understand the full scope before determining the most effective approach to exposure and accountability." Winters gestured to Sophia. "Ms. Reyes has been instrumental in securing both the evidence and our safety. I'd prefer she participate in any discussion of next steps." The acknowledgement of her central role caught Sophia by surprise. Despite her active involvement in every phase of this developing situation, she had continued to think of herself as an incidental participant, the random forest ranger Vala had happened to find. Winter's statement reframed her position entirely, recognizing her as an essential ally rather than circumstantial assistant. "Of course," Whitfield agreed readily. "Ms. Reyes' perspective will be valuable, particularly given her unique entry point to this situation." The next 2 hours were consumed with comprehensive review of the evidence Winters had gathered at extraordinary personal risk. The Congresswoman approached the material with methodical thoroughness, asking precise questions that demonstrated both her technical understanding and her grasp of the oversight implications. The documented violations exceeded even Sophia's understanding. From earlier summaries, Axiom had not merely circumvented ethical restrictions, they had deliberately falsified research protocols, misrepresented test results, and concealed adverse outcomes that would have immediately terminated authorization even within classified programs. 47 research subjects, Whitfield summarized grimly, reviewing the records. Military working dogs with exceptional service records and years of operational value reduced to expendable test subjects. 17 fatalities directly attributable to experimental compounds, documented but reported as training accidents or operational casualties. Her expression grew increasingly severe as she reviewed the authorization chain. These signatures represent officials from 3 different agencies, each exceeding their authority and violating explicit congressional directives. This isn't just unethical research, it's deliberate subversion of lawful oversight. Sophia observed Vala's reaction to this discussion. The dog remained alert but calm, his attention shifting between speakers as if following the conversation with precise understanding. Scout had settled near Winter's feet, his recovery continuing to progress despite the lingering evidence of his injuries. "What's our next step?" Winters asked, the strain of extended discussion evident in his voice, despite his improved condition. Typically, evidence of this nature would be presented through the Inspector General's office with simultaneous notification to congressional oversight, Whitfield replied. But given the high-level involvement indicated in these authorization chains, standard protocols may be compromised. She considered for a moment, her expression reflecting complex calculations of institutional power and procedural options. I believe our most effective approach is simultaneous disclosure to multiple accountability systems, Inspector General, Armed Services Committee, and select trusted media contacts. Creating immediate public awareness alongside official channels will prevent administrative burial of the evidence. Blackwood will move to discredit the documentation, Winters warned, and Axiom has significant resources for both legal challenges and narrative control, which is why timing and comprehensive distribution are essential, Whitfield agreed. Once this evidence enters multiple channels simultaneously, no single point of influence can contain it. Sophia considered the implications of this strategy. What about protection for Sergeant Winters and the dogs? Blackwood made it clear they're considered valuable military assets, not just witnesses. The Congresswoman turned her attention to Sophia, her assessment direct and unsparing. You understand that once this evidence becomes public, protection becomes more complicated rather than less. Axiom and its government enablers will deploy significant resources to undermine credibility and recover what they consider proprietary research assets. The dogs, Sophia clarified, her protective instinct sharpening. Precisely. Valor and Scout represent not just evidence of the program, but its most successful control subjects, examples of what the enhanced training can accomplish without experimental compounds. Their operational capabilities make them invaluable research baselines. This framing of the dogs as research baselines, rather than sentient partners, struck Sophia as fundamentally wrong, though she recognized the Congresswoman was simply articulating the perspective they were fighting against. These aren't research assets, Sophia said firmly. They're service members who have demonstrated extraordinary loyalty and intelligence. Their partnership with Sergeant Winters is what made exposing this program possible. Whitfield studied Sophia with renewed interest. Your advocacy is noted and appreciated, Ms. Reyes. I assure you, securing appropriate protection and recognition for all three service members is integral to my approach. The Congresswoman's deliberate inclusion of the dogs in the category of service members suggested genuine understanding of their status beyond conventional military asset classification. Sophia felt a measure of her wariness diminish in response to this subtle but significant acknowledgement. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.